You know, it's such a common situation. Over 5,000 words in English, right? You can read these really complex
Oh,
articles.
yeah, totally.
You're watching movies without subtitles. You're getting all the subtle jokes. You've basically spent hundreds of hours studying, but then, the moment arrives.
Right, the pressure is on.
Exactly. You're sitting in a meeting, or maybe you're just, I don't know, at a coffee shop, and someone asks you a direct question. The spotlight just swings right over to you. It's your turn to speak.
And we all know what happens
Your
next.
brain just goes completely, utterly blank.
Yeah.
I mean, you know the words, but you just can't find them. Your heart rate spikes. The silence just sort of stretches out, and it gets incredibly awkward. It is like one of the most universally frustrating experiences for anyone trying to communicate in a second language.
It really is an agonizing feeling. And the thing is, you aren't lacking the intelligence or the vocabulary. Like you said, the ideas are right there in your head.
They're right there.
Yeah. But under the pressure of that real-time interaction, the cognitive bridge between your brain and your mouth, it just simply collapses. You experience this literal bottleneck in your working memory.
Exactly. And fixing that bottleneck? Well, that's our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring a source document today. It's simply titled Parts, and it outlines this highly specific 7-part framework of what they call speaking frames.
Right, speaking frames.
Yeah, and we were going to dig right into this because the document claims that mastering this framework doesn't just help you speak, a little better. It actually cures that mind blank problem entirely and builds instant fluency.
And what makes this source material so compelling, I think, is its core thesis. It basically argues that the fundamental mistake language learners make is believing they need to generate every single sentence from nothing.
Like they're writing a novel on the spot.
Exactly. They think fluency is this constant act of spontaneous creation. But native speakers, they do not create every sentence from scratch. They rely heavily on these pre-built familiar patterns just over and over again.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to understand how to cure that freeze-up response, we have to look at the very first microsecond of a conversation, the launch phase, I guess.
The launch phase, yeah.
How does a thought actually leave your brain and enter the room?
Well, that launch phase is critical. When a learner freezes, they are usually trying to simultaneously figure out what they want to say, how to conjugate the verbs, which preposition to use, what the correct word order is.
It's way too much at once.
It really is. It's too much cognitive load. So the source document suggests starting with fixed frames, things like I think, or I feel like, or for me personally, from my point of view.
I have to push back a little right out of the gate, though, because you know our listeners.
Sure.
They are smart, dedicated learners. Aren't phrases like I think or, for me, almost, I don't know, painfully basic.
I can see why it feels that way.
Right. It feels like something you learn in week 1. Do truly advanced fluent speakers actually rely on something that simple when they are trying to sound intelligent?
That gets at the surface of the issue, but it's actually much deeper than just the vocabulary itself. Yes, the words are simple, but advanced speakers absolutely rely on them because of what they do to your brain's processing power.
Okay, how so?
Think of your working memory like the RAM in a computer. If your RAM is entirely consumed by constructing the grammar of your opening phrase, you have zero processing power left to focus on your actual message.
Right. It's like you're trying to build the engine while driving the car.
Exactly.
To me, trying to construct a sentence entirely from scratch under pressure, it's like trying to mold individual bricks out of wet clay while someone is just staring at you, waiting for an answer.
That's a great analogy.
You're like scooping the clay, baking the brick, placing... I mean, it takes way too long.
It takes forever. And in that analogy, these speaking frames are pre-made Lego blocks.
Oh, I like that. Lego blocks.
Yeah, you don't have to bake them. You don't even have to look at them. When you internalize a slightly more advanced frame, like from my point of view, you are treating those 5 words as one single, unbreakable unit of language.
So you aren't thinking about the grammar of it at all?
Not at all. Your brain doesn't process from and my and then point. It just grabs the whole block.
So you bypass the grammar completely in that moment.
Precisely. You remove the cognitive load of syntax. By snapping that pre-made block onto the board, your mouth starts moving automatically.
Right, because the pattern is already there.
Yeah, and because your mouth is moving and making sound, your brain actually relaxes. It has the split second it needs to focus on the actual idea you want to express.
Oh, wow. So it buys you time, basically.
It does. You can
Oh,
seamlessly transition into, from my point of view, experience matters a lot without that initial cortisol spike.
That makes a ton of sense. You just snap the block onto the board and you're off.
Yeah.
But okay, Let's say I've successfully launched my thought.
Right, the launch is good.
The clay is baked, the block is down, I'm speaking. But I notice a lot of learners immediately hit a brick wall right after that. They launch, and then they just stop.
Yes, the abrupt stop.
Right, like someone asks, how's the new software? And they say, from my point of view, it's good, period, end of sentence. And the conversation just dies right there.
That is the classic short answer trap. You've initiated speech, but you haven't provided any momentum.
Yeah, it feels very dead end.
A conversation is an exchange of energy, right? And a short, closed answer kills the energy. To escape that trap, you need frames that explicitly force you to elaborate.
So instead of just struggling to find the next random thought, you use a specific structural tool. Like looking at the source document, it suggests using framing phrases specifically designed to introduce reasons.
Exactly.
Things like, the reason is, or, that's because, one reason is, another thing is, and oh, the thing is.
Right. And the genius of these specific phrases is their psychological function.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because if you really listen to how native speakers talk in casual settings, they lean heavily on phrases like, the thing is.
Oh, constantly.
Right. They'll say, the thing is, I just don't have enough time for this project. Or, the thing is, everyone reacts differently. Using that specific frame doesn't just add words, it instantly shifts the whole vibe of the conversation.
It really does. It changes the tone.
It makes you sound like you are letting the listener in on a secret, or sharing a personal confession. It turns a sterile response into an intimate conversation.
What's fascinating here is how these transition words physically compel you to keep speaking. When you utter the phrase, the reason is, or that's because, you create a grammatical and social expectation.
You can't just stop there.
You literally cannot just say, the reason is, and then walk away.
Right. You've opened a loop. The listener is leaning forward, waiting for the rest of the sentence. You have forced yourself to hold the floor.
Exactly. The frame demands completion. It organically lengthens your footprint in the conversation. And if we look at the cognitive mechanics of this, it's like a traffic bottleneck versus an express lane.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, when learners translate word by word from their native language into English, they are stopping at a toll booth for every single word.
Oh man, that sounds exhausting.
It is. They pay the toll, move forward an inch, pay the next toll. It's draining.
That is a perfect way to describe the feeling of translating in your head. Just toll booth after toll booth.
But when you master a frame, like, one reason is that you have an easy pass. You are cruising through the express lane.
Nice.
You pull the entire concept of providing justification off the mental shelf instantly. You transition from a passive responder who just says, I like mornings, to an active participant who says, I like mornings. And the reason is that I feel much more productive before the world wakes up.
So we've launched the thought, and we've avoided the short answer trap by throwing down an easy pass frame that forces us to elaborate. We're driving down the highway, holding the floor like a pro.
Smooth sailing.
But let's be real. At some point, the highway just ends. You're talking, you're explaining your reasons, and then boom, panic sets in.
It happens to everyone.
You completely lose your train of thought mid-sentence. We all do it. The question is, how do you recover without crashing back into that awful, awkward silence?
This is a crucial pivot point in language mastery. It's the moment you have to deploy the art of stalling, combined with the art of grounding. The source document tackles this by introducing specific frames designed entirely to buy you time.
I call them the anti-panic buttons.
That's exactly what they are.
Because when learners get lost, what is the default behavior? They look up at the ceiling, they squint, and they let out the dreaded, drawn-out, or huh.
Yeah, the universal sign of distress.
Right, which just broadcasts to the whole room that they are struggling. But the document suggests swapping those out for phrases like, let me think, or that's a good question. I've never thought about that before. It really depends. And just to
like perfect grammar all the time.
Right. Perfect, uninterrupted, flawless articulation without a single pause. But that is simply false. Native speakers lose their train of thought constantly. They forget words. They get distracted.
So the goal isn't to never get lost. The goal is to know how to wander gracefully.
Precisely. They just throw the smoke bomb elegantly, saying, well, it really depends on the situation. It sounds entirely natural, but of course you can't just stall forever.
Right, eventually the smoke clears.
Exactly. Once the smoke clears, you have to ground the conversation again. That's where the next set of frames comes in, which is providing concrete examples.
Right, the document highlights frames like, for instance, like, Such as, and a good example is, so you go from the abstract panic, you throw the smoke bomb to buy time, and then you anchor yourself to something tangible.
Intangible is the key word here. Abstract concepts demand high cognitive load. Concrete examples demand very little.
That makes sense. If you are struggling to explain the philosophy of a healthy lifestyle, you stall with, "Oh, well, it really depends," and then you immediately drop into the concrete.
So you say something like, but for instance, I like activities such as swimming and hiking.
Yes. You've saved the sentence, maintained your fluency, and provided clarity to the listener.
Okay, I'm tracking with you. We've launched the thought, we're giving reasons, and we know how to deploy our smoke bombs and concrete examples if we stumble. At this point, we are functionally competent.
We are surviving the conversation.
Yeah, but surviving isn't the same as thriving. How do we take this from a functional exchange of information and make it actually interesting? How do we sound less like a textbook and more like a multidimensional human being?
That requires adding layers to your arguments and injecting your own personal history into the dialogue.
Because otherwise you're just listing facts.
Right. If you only ever give one reason and one example, you sound a bit like a robot answering a survey. To become captivating, you need to master the frames that allow you to stack ideas.
The source outlines phrases for adding these layers. Things like, besides that, on top of that, not only that, at the same time, and on the other hand.
And then it pairs those with frames specifically designed for talking about your past experiences.
Oh, these are great.
These are crucial. Phrases like, I've always, I've never, I've recently, I used to, and I've had the chance to.
I was actually looking at the examples in the document, and the contrast between a standard answer and a layered answer is just wild.
It's night and day.
It really is. Imagine someone at a networking event asks you, do you enjoy learning new skills? A standard, grammatically correct, but totally boring answer is, yes, I do. It is good for my career.
I mean, it's accurate, but it's a dead end.
Right. But if you weave in these layering and experience frames, the whole thing comes alive. You say, I've always enjoyed learning new things. I've recently started building better habits. On top of that, I feel more confident.
The transformation really is striking. It moves the interaction from a sterile Q&A session into genuine storytelling.
It really does. You are revealing actual details about your humanity. When you say, I used to play video games a lot, but I've recently shifted to reading, or I've never tried skydiving, but on the other hand, I love roller coasters, you are handing the other person conversational threads to pull on.
You're inviting them in.
Yeah, you are inviting them to connect with you on a personal level.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of cognitive science, there is a reason these experience frames feel so much more natural.
Okay, what's the science behind it?
When you use a phrase like I used to, you are triggering your brain's episodic memory. Episodic memory is where you store your personal experiences, your emotions, your history.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to semantic memory, which is where you store hard facts, grammar rules, and vocabulary translations.
Ah, I see.
Accessing semantic memory takes effort. Accessing episodic memory is fluid because it's your own life. When you master a frame like I've always, you aren't just bypassing the translation filter.
You're changing how your brain is operating.
Exactly. You are shifting your brain out of the stressful academic testing mode and into the relaxed storytelling mode.
You stop thinking about the mechanics of the language entirely because your brain just gets caught up in the memory of the story you're trying to tell.
Exactly. You pull the complex Lego block of contrasting ideas or past habits right off the shelf, and the language becomes the invisible vehicle for your memories rather than a puzzle you're trying to solve in real time.
Wow.
That is the exact threshold where learners report that incredible sensation of suddenly thinking faster when they speak.
That is a massive breakthrough concept. The language becomes invisible. Okay, so we've built this incredible conversational structure. We've shared our initial thoughts. We've backed them up with solid reasons. We've navigated the tricky moments with grace, and we've added deep personal layers.
A very successful interaction.
The conversation has been fantastic, but every good performance eventually needs a curtain drop.
True.
You can't just talk forever. And more importantly, you can't just let your brilliantly layered thought trail off into a hesitant mumble.
Which is incredibly common, unfortunately. A learner will build a fantastic, complex argument, but they don't know how to exit the sentence. So they just kind of lower their voice, shrug, and say, so...
Oh, man. It undermines everything they just built.
It totally deflates the balloon.
Right. So to stick the landing, the source provides a final set of frames specifically for wrapping up. Phrases like, so overall, at the end of the day, in general, to sum up, and that's why.
Using these finishing frames serves a vital function in spoken communication. They signal to the listener that your thought is complete and that you are officially handing the floor back to them.
Because if you don't do that, they don't know it's their turn.
Exactly. If you just stop talking after making your final point, the listener is left hanging in suspense, expecting you to continue.
You need to tie a bow on it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
A frame like, at the end of the day, family comes first, or that's why I prefer working remotely, resolves the musical tension of the conversation. It's a clear, confident handoff.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at all 7 parts of this framework working in harmony, it's actually an incredibly powerful system.
It really is.
The document provides a full-flow example that brilliantly demonstrates all these pieces snapping together. Listen to how naturally this flows. If someone asks, do you like learning English? You don't just say, yes, I like it.
No, you use the framework.
Exactly. You say, personally, I enjoy learning English. The reason is that it opens more opportunities for me. For example, I can watch videos and learn from people all around the world. On top of that, it helps me communicate better when I travel. So overall, I think it's an incredibly useful skill to have.
It is structured, it is comprehensive, and most importantly, it mimics the exact rhythm of a native speaker.
It sounds so natural.
And the source document leaves us with a very encouraging promise regarding this methodology. It emphasizes that if you actively engage with these frames,
Like really practice them.
yeah, if you shadow them, practice them aloud, and use them as your default anchors, something magical eventually happens.
It's the ultimate payoff.
Yes. The patterns become so deeply ingrained in your neural pathways that you stop overthinking entirely.
You're not searching for words anymore.
No, you aren't desperately searching your mental filing cabinets for individual words anymore. You are simply observing the situation and instinctively selecting the right pre-built pattern for the moment. It becomes muscle memory, but for your cognitive linguistic network.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
At first, you're thinking about balance and pedaling and steering all at once, and it's terrifying. You're wobbly.
Yeah.
But eventually, you just get on the bike and go wherever you want.
You don't even think about the pedaling.
Exactly. So, to recap this incredible journey for you listening, true fluency is not a race to memorize every single word in the dictionary.
Oh, definitely not.
It is about working smarter, not harder, by mastering these core patterns. It's about knowing how to launch your thought, how to force yourself to explain your reasons, how to buy time and ground yourself with examples when panic strikes, how to add personal layers to your stories, and how to confidently wrap it all up.
It provides you with a complete, unbreakable toolkit for handling small talk, high-pressure interviews, long-form storytelling, and really just the unpredictability of daily conversations.
Echoing the final challenge from the source document, I want to pose a question directly to you. Out of the 7 parts we covered today, which speaking frame do you think is going to save you the most stress?
That's a great question to reflect on.
Is it the conversational smoke bomb to buy yourself some time? Is it the wrap-up so you stop awkwardly trailing off with a, pick just one category this week, make it your easy pass, and start using it?
And I'll leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing how native English speakers rely heavily on these pre-packaged automatic formulas to keep their conversations flowing effortlessly.
Right.
It makes you wonder, what kind of hidden, invisible linguistic patterns are you unconsciously using in your own native language every single day without ever realizing it?
Oh, wow, that's wild to think about.
Once you start looking for the pre-built chunks in your own daily speech, you will see them everywhere. You'll realize you've been using Lego blocks your entire life.
That is a fascinating shift in perspective. We really are all just sophisticated pattern-matching machines at the end of the day. So, until next time, remember the ultimate takeaway from our deep dive today. Stop trying to build every sentence from scratch.
Yes. Keep training your mouth, your ears, and your brain to recognize the patterns.
No overthinking. Just grab the block and start speaking.